It's almost 2. I've been programming on some of this Response DB extension stuff. I wanted to get done before I go away for the weekend, and I'm going to go to a lake and camp with family and taking a canoe I bought, a used canoe, and that we placed the seats on and cross beams. The body of the canoe seems in pretty good shape, so I'm looking forward to that. And but I also kind of wanted to make this video for a couple days, and I don't want to do it when I come back. So that might help me make this brief and not a half-hour video this time. Though, though I like that duration for some reason. It's been suiting me. I don't go out planning to make it that long or short. So. But that's another subject. So the question is from Height Little Day, which was, does spirituality inform my general or ethical decision making? And yes, it does. And the reason I'm thinking that spirituality, this feeling of spirituality might be related to the feeling of meaning is because it's sort of meaning at a broad level, like meaning when it's not obvious, like seeing footsteps in the sand and knowing a person has gone there, and that means a person was there. We don't usually think of that as a spiritual experience, but when I was talking to Matt, I brought up, well, when I see the traces of animals in the forest, I do. And so maybe when there's an obvious terrestrial reason or meaning, smoking gun, he's the one that shot him. We just don't interpret that as spiritual because we have we interpret that as explanatory, whereas with mostly what I would personally consider spiritual experiences, or people would report as spiritual experiences, it's harder to grasp exactly the meaning. And in the past, I've said, it seems like when I'm looking at a big expansive vista, it's one of the most reliable things that I'll kind of have one of these moments, or if I was to try to actually go pursue a moment like that, as opposed to it just coming whenever, which is the other thing, the bigger thing. And the bigger ones come unexpected and don't seem to be, it's not really possible to provoke them. And I interpret that as having to do with all the details and the way everything fits together and your own size and your access to that graspness, and just a feeling of a meaning to it all, or an understanding. So obviously, if this is sort of the big picture meaning, a framework of meaning, like I'm rereading Thomas Kuhn's the Copernican revolution. He's talking about, well, before the Copernican revolution, for quite a while there had been this two-sphere idea of the cosmos, specifically that the Earth was an inner sphere and then the stars are on this outer sphere. And then he talks about how that went through all of these adaptations to explain the movement of the planets and stuff. But the point is that it provided a framework in which all sorts of other meaning, like in Aristotle's system, could be put in as details. So obviously that would inform decision making in general, but it's also somewhat indirect and removed, but crucial. This is, well, in the case of Kuhn's argument, this is why people held on to that view for so long and so adamantly, and had to be kind of brought kicking and screaming from it, because it served this purpose as a framework. But it is removed by layers of abstraction or something from, should I go to the park or whatever, some mundane, so-called mundane decision, right? So so in my case, definitely the spiritual experiences relate to how I think people should interact and fit together. The meaning of having a society, the meaning of having a nation. I don't think the meaning of having a nation is to cut each other's throats and run a big rat race to see which is the biggest rat. So course that informs them. But I think it's important to remember, I don't take, just because I had a spiritual feeling doesn't mean I'm like, oh, I'll follow that. It's just because have a feeling of, oh, that looks like a lovely person, doesn't mean I believe that. I don't believe we should take any of our feelings, or or for that matter, our arguments, um, without a grain of salt. I mean, I don't think we should just take them for granted and run with them. I believe in using basically statistical analysis processes, no processes, um, to analyze those things. To create, you create an argument, you attack it, you create alternate versions. You're doing information processing on whatever might have started as a single, excuse me, as a single, as a particular, rather, as a particular moment of inspiration where you had a feeling, Eureka, I've got it. Just think, I must be right. A lot of people do, but I don't. I don't advise just taking that stuff as it appears to be initially. It needs to have scrutiny, right? So if I have a spiritual experience and tells me I should do something, I don't just run out and do it. I don't just get a new idea and say, oh, but I had one experience. It's not a statistical sample. On the other hand, I will remember that experience for a long time. And as they add up, I will try to integrate them. Now, the other thing I wanted to say is, I have normalized for myself what I think morality and ethics is. And it's not what everybody says that it is, or I'm not saying that it is a thing in the real world. I'm saying I have devised for myself a way of thinking about what morality is that suits my needs for analyzing morality and my needs for dealing with the fact that I have a morality, and how can I alter the morality, and answering meta questions about morality, like, should I change my moral system? I needed a system for that, and so I've systematized it. And I actually think it is pretty good and pretty general purpose. And it is related to my spiritual experiences about how things fit together, right? And in the big picture way. On the other hand, I analyze morality the same way that I'm talking about analyzing spirituality. This is how I believe in analyzing human experiences. And I believe we're emotional creatures. We have feelings. And people seem to think sometimes, often, and I'm running into this, that if you are talking about feelings, you were kind of going at that somehow that's irrational. Like, it's not possible to be rational about feelings. Like, if I say, hey, I had the feeling of hunger a while ago, and now I'm feeling excited anticipation. Like, what's that hoo-ha? How do you know there's any difference? Hunger was anticipated. No, you could tell the difference between your emotional states. I mean, just like you can tell the difference between red and blue. Some people can tell the difference between blue and cyan. Some can't. They just haven't practiced. Some people have, what is that called, synesthesia or whatever, where you see sounds as colors, or and parts of the brain can trigger other parts of the brain, but there still is a possible avenue, and we all do make distinctions between certain of our emotional experiences. And I think most people can tell that there really is a feeling of love, and we really debate whether it relates to anything in the real world or is just an illusion or whatever it is. We can discuss that, but there's a feeling that's distinct from pain, or from mental anguish, right? So this is what I've done with the experiences, let's call it, for ease, because it's a complex situation, because really I believe that a moral system is a system, a philosophical system that helps give advice. You know, it helps to, you use it as a tool to analyze a real situation that might be not self-evident how you should react, and so a moral system is a system that helps you do that. And then we also have this set of experiences or examples. They can be imaginary and thought experiences, but even better yet are moral questions. Questions we would call moral questions, that we have called moral questions over time in the real world. And by analyzing those and people's answers and my own preferred answers with respect to how I think things, what is the meaningful way for things to fit together, according to me, I've come up with a system that, okay, I think morality is a system of, is a moral system answers the question or attempts to address the question of how should you treat people in a group you belong to, right? I used to think ethics was just sort of a more practical or less intense version of that, but in reality, you could say it's the more intense version. Right now, because it fits within this framework so that I can do reasoning with it, you know, imagine that I'm starting with a crude mathematics and I'm trying to improve the mathematics, and if I diverge from how other people think of morality, I'm not really bothered by that because, for one, people aren't doing so hot thinking about it. According to me, right? According to me, I also think that current organized religions of the world are pretty corrupted in general compared to how I think a healthy spirituality should work. That's in my opinion. That's my assessment. And but anyway, um, that was sort of a side comment, not necessarily particularly you, Heitlade. I'm thinking of other things in terms of making that point as clear as possible. So, a moral system is trying to address and answer how should you treat people or things that are in a group you belong to, and an ethical system is saying how should people in a role treat other people in the system with different roles, right? And it may or may not be, uh, that you feel like you're a part of the group that your role plays a part in, right? So, the ethics of treating animals. Well, to me, I believe that there's a moral question, and that I'm in the group of mammals. I'm right. Okay, vegans. Yes, we can discuss your issues. Um, and but on the other hand, there's also, I believe, humans have a role in that nature. We're not exactly the same, and that's why I don't have the same moral expectations on a free tiger that I would have for a free person. Um, and so, to me, just the fact that I'm describing morality as any kind of system that answers that question, and the fact that everybody belongs to a bunch of different groups, you have a bunch of moral systems, and to me, this explains a lot. I can use this to explain, to model the kind of conflicts that people have, like within the community at large. It's wrong to steal. That's how you should treat other people in your community. On the other hand, your role within your family, can be that, how should you treat other people in this group that's your family? Well, if they're minors and they're starving, you should share your food with them. You should go and make sure you obtain food. So there might be a conflict there, and I tend to think that push comes to shove, usually people will adopt the tightest circle in the conflict, right? The narrowest group, or the most intimate group. And but not as a, not as a rule of psychology, because it's really going to be based on where the identification is stronger, and then people of high ethical standards will specifically take that kind of thing into account and not be sort of nepotistic in their application of morality. They'll refuse to collapse it. So, so if there's a contradiction, they'll put in a lot of energy to make sure they stay in the scope they think the question applies in. But that kind of by default we see moral valuations, and this is, this helps me explain situations where people seem like, well, they're total, Pinochet's killing a few people a day for uh, his whole reign in Chile, but he's not killing people every day from his own family, even people he's angry at. So how do you explain that if somebody has kind of a moral behavior with some group, and then with another group totally not? Um, uh, and then there's a middle group where it's kind of, it can go both ways, and I think you need to use multiple moralities. So does spirituality impact that? Yeah, because of my spiritual experiences, what I believe is that my goal with the moralities is to have it in concentric circles, so that it's nested, so that it goes out, from self to nuclear family and extended family and your community and your nation or whatever, or, and your species, and whatever the super species is called, mammals. It goes out in, as far as you could make it. And the idea is to get to lead a life that is moral in all of those echelons, right? And also, um, I don't believe, I believe there, you can't cheat. You can't say the reason it goes out to mammals before it goes out to all vertebrates is because uh, consider somebody that says, well, really, okay, I'm going to be the most enlightened and most moral person. I'm going to send I am a part of a group called all of the universe. Well, you don't understand all of the universe. You don't really know all the universe. You can't come up with your rules of how to treat all of the universe, including the parts you have no idea of. So it necessarily has to go out in these echelons of groups you understand, right? And so I also relate the word enlightenment to this, is because I think it's a metaphor where you're saying you have more light, which is saying that your vision as to what you're connected to, what kinds of groups or systems you are a part of, depends on how far you can see into the distance, right? And I think modern man has enough information at her fingertips to really pursue a morality that really is more all of Earth. I think we have enough knowledge now that we can visualize ourselves as a part of the Earth ecosystem, and we can have a morality about how everything should be treated in that, in general, and then have ethics which relate to particular roles. So there's a morality of how you think the family should treat, members of the family should treat each other, but there's an ethics because some of those members are children, so they can't have exactly the same role. They can't be expected to actually behave exactly like every other member, right? So there's a moral principle of how you should look out for each other and you should respect each other, and but there's also role-based ethical questions within that system. So what was it? Yeah. All right. Okay. See you guys all next week, at which time I will have some announcements about the Response DB tool. basically it's doing what I want to do for the first release, but I've got to test it on Mac and PC because I'm developing it on Linux primarily is where I do my testing. And I might write some instructions or something, and it's just going to be a first viable version, so I'm pretty happy about that. And all right, cheers.